He opened his eyes, a bright white ceiling, the stinging smell of disinfectant, the feeling of a hard bed behind his back. Jinwoo immediately realized where he had opened his eyes, a hospital. Although he found himself coming less and less after meeting the B-rank healer-class hunter Juhee, the hospital was still a place Jinwoo could call a second home. After all, there were even rumors that there was a room reserved just for him here. Jinwoo sat upright, holding his hand up to his chest. He felt the regular beating of his heart. I'm alive. Not just alive. His entire body felt lighter than usual compared to the heaviness he felt when he would normally open his eyes. Here, something was different. It was as if he woke up after a good rest in his own home. When he remembered the scene before he passed out, it was an unthinkable occurrence. The falling sword, the statues that surrounded him. Even if he had somehow dodged the sword, it would take a party composed of A-rank, no S-rank hunters to defeat the enemies in that room. And I came out of there alive. Was it a dream? Thankfully, there was an easy way to find out. Jinwoo looked underneath the blanket covering him. If it was all real, he would be missing a leg. Then a deep voice interrupted him. Have you regained consciousness? Two men, kitted out in black business suits, approached Jinwoo's bed. The youth tilted his head and asked them, Who are you? One of them, with close-cropped hair like a soldier and wearing a pair of sunglasses, presented him with a business card. This is who we are. Jinwoo received the business card and read what was written on it. Woojin Chol, the section chief of the monitoring division, the Korean Hunters Association. I was unconscious for 4 days. Just how did I get to this hospital? Did a large guild participate and kill those damn things? Well, actually, Woojin Chol awkwardly opened his mouth. By the time the agents of the monitoring division and the White Tiger Guild arrived at the scene after being briefed by the survivors, everything was gone. The only thing to be found within that open space was you, Mr. Sung Jinwoo. There was not one trace of the god statue, nor the stone statues. Jinwoo displayed a shocked, disbelieving face. It's hard for us to believe it as well. If there had been any inconsistencies in the testimonies of the survivors, or if we had failed to find the remains of the victims in the chamber, we might have suspected something fishy was going on. Woojin Chul carefully studied Jinwoo's reactions as he continued. We suspect that Hunter Sung Jinwoo Nim might have gone through another awakening, a reawakening. Jinwoo's eyes shot open wide. Although extremely rare, there had been instances of a human who had awakened their abilities as a hunter going through yet another awakening, often referred to as reawakening. Those who undergo this process would normally become extremely powerful compared to before. Originally, once a hunter's rank was assigned at the beginning, it rarely changed. A hunter's abilities were determined the moment one went through an awakening. That was why, however, it was a different story for those going through the reawakening process, jumping past their own limitations to rise up from, say, rank C to A, or even from B to S. Such things had happened before. The god statue was said to have melted rank S hunters with nothing but its eyes, according to the survivors. If one were able to kill such a creature even while unconscious, just how powerful one could possibly be. To prepare for this unlikeliest possibility, Woojin Chul labeled this incident top secret and made sure everyone involved would keep their mouths shut. Could Korea finally have a hunter on the level of an international powerhouse? Of course, confirming the truth of the reawakening wasn't difficult at all. Didn't the wise elders once say to make hay while the sun still shines? Woojin Chul signaled to his lackey, Bring it here. Although this device had been miniaturized, its efficiency or accuracy did not fall short of the actual full-size measuring device located in the Hunters Association. Jinwoo placed his hand on top of the black crystal, and soon enough, warm rays of light oozed out from it. Cold sweat drops formed on the foreheads of Woojin Chul and his lackey. Not too long after, the lights surrounding the crystal dissipated. Woojin Chul hurriedly took off his sunglasses and confirmed the numbers right away. A small earthquake rocked Woojin Chul's eyes. How can this be? He rechecked the numbers, but it remained the same. How could a person holding a hunter license possess the magic energy value of only 10, when considering the fact that the lowest average value for rank E, the bottom rank, was around 70 to 100, Sang Jinwoo was no different from a regular person. Woojin Chul rapidly realized that being here was a waste of time, so he got up from his seat. Let's go. Yes, sir. Woojin Chul and his lackey quickly packed up to leave. Thank you for your cooperation. If you remember anything else, please give us a call anytime. As if their rear ends were on fire, the two men in black rapidly left the room as soon as they put away the device. The hospital room that felt rather small suddenly became quiet and lonely. Jinwoo looked up without thinking and saw words floating in the air. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The words remained floating there without a single change. He shook his head hard a few times and even rubbed his eyes, but they were still there. Jinwoo massaged his aching forehead and lowered his head. It hadn't been a long time since he started hearing weird things, but now he was even seeing them too. Could something in his head really be broken? There was a condition called PTSD after all. It was only a few days ago since he witnessed the deaths of many of his comrades, not to mention he himself nearly died as well. So it would not be so strange to hear or see weird things as a possible side effect. However, there were a couple of things that prevented him from dismissing this out of hand. Jinwoo's sight lowered to his leg. The leg that got cut in half by the shield of the stone statue was now all fine and dandy. The voice he heard out of the blue inside the underground temple hidden within the depths of the dual dungeon. His completely cured leg, and now those words floating in front of his eyes. Too many weird things were happening all at once. What if there was a chance that all these things were not isolated events, but linked to one another? Once the confusion in his heart died down and he felt calmer, he became quite curious about the contents of those so-called unread messages. There might be answers to his questions found within those messages. In order to confirm the messages, he reached out towards the words and his hand simply went past them. It's not touch-operated. It seemed that he got way too used to how a smartphone worked. I want to read, I want to look. Hey, show me already, will you? Just what is it that you wish to see that bad? He felt a cold, probing stare coming from the side, so he turned his head to look and spotted his little sister in her school uniform, looking at him from the gap of the half-open door. Jinwoo became speechless. Maybe you hurt your head really bad? The younger sister stood at a distance away and asked, Jinwoo, are you really okay? Yes, I'm telling you the truth. I told you to stop getting hurt. You have any idea how worried I was? I'm sorry, other people walk away fine. But how come it's only you who gets hurt all the time? Sorry, I was thinking of leaving behind this kid alone and dying, wasn't I? What a relief that he made it out alive. Jinwoo's gaze shifted ever so slightly towards the words floating in the air. It still feels like I haven't completely woken up from that nightmare just yet, doesn't it? There were so many things he couldn't understand, but so what? The most important thing was that he came back alive and got to see his little sister again. Do you hear me? If you get hurt one more time, I'm going to give up on studying, find a job, and make sure you don't work as a hunter ever again. Hey Jin, yeah, when you are playing video games, Jinwoo smirked softly. I don't play games anymore. The third year of high school is only a few days away, you know. I know. When there are unread messages in a game, what should I do? Access them? You gotta open the mailbox first. As soon as Jinwoo said the word open, a clear beep entered his head and the hidden messages revealed themselves. Congratulations on becoming a Jinwoo smiled brightly, finally seeing her older brother's complexion suddenly brighten like that. Jinna felt something was wrong and quickly asked him, What's up? What game is it? You need my help? Jinwoo firmly shook his head. Nope, no need. I'll do it alone. How would his younger sibling react if he told her what had been happening to him right now? I really don't want to be labeled as a loon by her. Congratulations on becoming a. He thought that the first message sounded familiar, as if he heard it before from somewhere. Where have I heard it from? I know I have. He heard those words just before he lost his consciousness. The system, growth, penalties, and finally rewards. The words with unknown meanings fell on his lap one after the other. Just what will it help grow, and what will it reward me with? He decided to worry about the confusing words later and calmly opened the next message. Preparations to become strong is now available. Gulp. Jinwoo unconsciously swallowed his saliva. After reading that rather suggestive title, his heart began to beat faster in anticipation. Confirm. Press up 100 times, incomplete. Sit up 100 times, incomplete. Squat 100 times, incomplete. Running 10 km, incomplete. Incompletion of daily quests will result in appropriate levels of punishment. Jinwoo reflexively spat out a dumbfounded chuckle after confirming the contents of the message. Haha, seriously, ma'am? Should this be the feeling of disappointment? To think that the grand-sounding daily quest was nothing more than a list of physical exercises to train his body. Well, for sure, if he did as the quest said, then his body might get a bit tougher. Jinwoo shook his head. He suddenly thought that he was a fool for searching for answers to his many questions from a damned hallucination. I'm sure these hallucinations and weird things I hear will eventually go away with time. His eyelids slowly closed shut, and Jinwoo drifted away into a deep slumber. Tick, tock. Even when Jinwoo was softly snoring to himself, the needles of the clock hanging by the wall continued to tick away. The needles spun and spun around until they indicated 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 57 seconds p.m. Tick-tock, tick, 58, 59, 60. Jinwoo's eyes shot right open from the violent tremor that shook his entire body, an earthquake. Jinwoo sat right up and grabbed the edges of the bed. The shaking was so bad that he couldn't maintain his balance. Rumble. The shaking got progressively worse as the seconds ticked by. Then one of the steel bars on the bed he held on for dear life suddenly broke. No, it didn't break per se, but simply disappeared. Jinwoo hurriedly looked at his palm. No steel bar there, just grains of sand. Sand. Jinwoo spat out the sand in his mouth and hurriedly raised his head. His eyes caught the sight of an endless plain of nothing but sand. Jinwoo frowned heavily and got up. All the sand that found its way inside his clothes poured out. He dusted the sand caked on his chest while taking a look around him. Indeed, all he could see was sand and more sand. A desert. This couldn't be real until a few moments ago he was sleeping on a bed inside a hospital located in the middle of Seoul. But now, as soon as he opened his eyes, he was in the middle of a massive desert. Jinwoo scooped up a handful of sand and let it slip through his fingers. The fine grains fell straight down to the ground. He was getting a really bad premonition right about now. Sure enough, just as Jinwoo took a step back, the sand within the pit suddenly exploded upwards. The falling sand emitted the roar of a waterfall. Jinwoo's eyes went extra round. In the meantime, the identity of the thing that exploded out from the sand was a giant centipede. When fully revealed, the beast's height almost equaled that of a 5-story building. Jinwoo anxiously swallowed his saliva. This was unreal for sure. The beast was unrealistically huge. He had never heard of a centipede this big existing in the world before. Goal: please survive until the end of the time limit. Time limit: 4 hours remaining. Time 4 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Are you kidding me? However, as soon as the remaining time changed to 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, the centipede parted the sand and rushed towards him as if it couldn't wait any longer. What the hell? Jinwoo hurriedly spun around and ran for his life. There was no time to deliberate on things. If he wanted to live, then he had to run. That was the only thought racing in his head. However, even before he had taken several steps, another pillar of sand exploded upwards not too far from his position. Jinwoo fell on his rear from the powerful shockwave. He rolled on the sandy ground before urgently getting back up. He swiped the sand off his face before his eyes shot open even wider. This time it wasn't just one or two of them. Boom! Before he had even noticed it, there were 7 sand centipedes jutting out from the sand, and they were all glaring at him as the centipedes issued shrill cries. Jinwoo's complexion changed for the worse. Jinwoo reappeared in the hospital room exactly 4 hours later. Flop. Jinwoo keeled over on the floor and painfully wheezed out, cough, cough. His mouth felt full of this coarse, grainy taste. His eyes stung badly too, seemingly like sand particles got in there. Jinwoo whimpered and groaned for a long time before powerlessly falling flat on his back. He didn't have any energy left to lift even a finger. What was that? Jinwoo continued to pant heavily when a new message appeared before him. Jinwoo's expression crumpled into something unsightly, a penalty quest. Did he do something worthy of being punished? Jinwoo carefully retraced his memories until he recalled that he abandoned midway yesterday. Could it be? Now that he thought about it, it definitely said that if the quest was not completed, he'd be hit with a corresponding penalty. Jinwoo lapped the outer perimeter of the hospital once and arrived back in front of his room. He was currently bent over and panting heavily. His heart felt like it might explode at any second, but he couldn't give up yet. He had worked so crazy hard until now, so there was no way he would. He somehow managed to open the door and took a step forward. It was finally over. Pant, pant. Jinwoo fell to his knees. His breath reeked of something sweet and bitter. His face and back were soaked in sweat. Pant, pant. As Jinwoo tried to regulate his heavy, rough breathing while thick sweat drops continuously dripped down, a familiar message popped up in front of his eyes. Jinwoo momentarily thought about forgetting about everything and simply laying down in defeat, but he quickly changed his mind. At least for now, he wanted to confirm what these reward things could actually be with his own eyes. First confirm Reward 1, full recovery of the current physical condition. Reward 2, 3 additional stat points. Reward 3, 1 random box. Why are there so many of them? That was the first thought to enter his dazed mind after he took a gander at the contents of his rewards. But when he thought about it a little deeper, one of those rewards seemed rather useful right now, and there was also one that made him curious about what it could actually mean. For now, he urgently needed the first reward available. He was on the brink of collapsing here, since there really was a penalty for failure. The odds of completion rewards being real were pretty damn high as well. Well, trying wouldn't hurt anyways, right? Seriously, this thing wouldn't throw him back into the penalty zone again after it said it had given him the rewards. Now would it? When Jinwoo shifted his gaze around, he spotted a small box resting on top of the bed, as well as his own stat window floating in the air. He guessed that the thing over there was the random box, but the important thing was his stat window. This window displayed simple information about himself. What he paid attention to was the skills column, a passive skill called tenacity and an active one called dash. For some reason, he felt rather familiar with them. Ah, he remembered now. Yesterday, or to be more precise, back in the early dawn of this morning, he remembered hearing those words while being chased around by the centipedes in the penalty zone. It happened probably after 3 hours of him constantly running for his dear life. He was suddenly greeted by a couple of new messages, the daily quest that would continue to show up every day, and the stat points as the reward. As long as this unexplainable phenomenon didn't come to a sudden end, he'd be able to live a completely different life to the one he'd been leading until now. This was an unbelievable opportunity for him. Besides that, the stat window also showed his level. Does this mean he could also increase his level too eventually, though? Jinwoo shook his head. No, there's no way. Now that would be too good to be true. He wasn't hoping that far anyway. The rewards from the quests alone made plenty enough for him. It had been a week since he started taking on the daily quests. Several changes took place during this time. One of them happened to be the transformation of his body. He had definitely changed. His body was in the middle of a transformation. They've got muscles now. The most eye-catching change was the drastic increase in his muscles. The normal-looking flabby flesh was gradually disappearing, only to be replaced by hard muscles. Thanks to that, his shoulders had widened more, and his overall frame had grown bigger as well. Even then, he didn't seem heavy and slow. If you were to describe the overall impression his body gave off, then would it be kind of like looking swift and athletic? He was a guy, and even he found this rather appealing. It wasn't such a strange thing for young nurses to whisper about him, and it was all due to this guy over here. However, it was way too eye-catching, wasn't it? The number of times he was mentioned by the nurses was constantly on the rise. It was quite likely that since their job involved looking after human bodies, their levels of discernment could have been higher than most. Jinwoo possessed quite a keen sense of hearing, so whenever his name was mentioned in the vicinity, he took note of it. He guessed it was time for him to leave this hospital. It was not good to be the center of attention. Not only would he feel uncomfortable being placed under the spotlight, but he also didn't want to let others know of this strange phenomenon. Didn't the old saying go something like, scratching unnecessarily results in more flakes to clean up or something like that? He wanted to increase his stat points as quietly as possible, and it shouldn't be a problem for him to leave the hospital now too. Thankfully, tests had shown that he was normal and healthy, meaning he could leave at any time he wanted. No, hang on a minute. It kind of felt like both the hospital and the association wanted him to leave in the first place. Well, it would be a waste to spend that much money as a hospital fee on a measly rank E like him. One of the special privileges the S-ranked hunters enjoyed was the government paying for all of their health-related expenses. Of course, that was a story happening in another cosmos as far as Jinwoo was concerned. So he figured that it wouldn't be such a bad idea to leave this hospital right about now. And there was something he wanted to confirm as well. Now, where did I put it? Jinwoo rummaged around his pockets and brought something out. It was a key gleaming in a golden hue. It featured such a simple design that it could be passed off as an accessory at a casual glance. Type key. A key that transfers you to an instant dungeon. Can be used at the third exit of the Haejung subway station. He found this key inside one of the random boxes he got as the daily quest rewards. At first he wondered why a key would come out from there, but once he saw the rarity category, he immediately realized that this was no ordinary item. This was one of the reasons prompting him to get discharged from the hospital as well. An entrance key to the instant dungeon. Whether it was called instant or not, a dungeon was a dungeon. If it was about dungeons, then he had plenty of painful memories regarding those. He was sure there would be no problems as long as he just took a quick peek inside. If things looked bad, all he had to do was run away, after all. He'd been running 10 kilometers every day for a while now, so he was pretty confident of running away. Actually, it was his mistake for taking it too lightly. Slam, slam! Is there a wall blocking me? He pounded on the invisible wall and shouted at the outside, but no one replied back. People continued to carry on with their own lives, that was all. Sometimes someone approached the Haejong station, but they simply vanished as soon as they came in contact with this invisible wall. It was quite likely that the place he was in and the outside world were two separate dimensions. Jinwoo tried his hardest to force his way out of this place, which prompted a new alert message to pop up. It was the same message as before. The key in his possession disappeared as soon as he set foot inside the third exit of the subway station. By the time Jinwoo realized things had gone rather far and hurriedly turned around to leave, it was already too late. He was thinking of finding a hidden gate or some kind of doorway within the third exit that would transport him to a dungeon, but his expectation was completely off the mark. It was quite different from the regular dungeons. He couldn't even leave as he pleased too. It was different from other dungeons. Jinwoo nervously swallowed his saliva and slowly descended the steps. He held his breath and surveyed his surroundings, but he couldn't sense anything particular. However, it was truly forbidden to underestimate the dangers in a dungeon. Among the low-ranked monsters, there were quite a few that knew how to mask and hide their presence very well, perhaps because they were so low-ranked that they had no choice but to hide and wait to ambush their prey. Past the toilets, he entered deeper and encountered the underground shopping center. The shops were worn down and in complete disarray, looking more like ruins than anything else. The humanless, ruined shells of the shops were dimly illuminated by the flickering overhead lamps. Something felt rather ominously creepy and sinister. A few of the lamps continued to flicker as if their lives were nearing the end. Everything seemed so quiet and still, but he did sense a gaze of something. And then there was this smell too. The seriously rotten odor of an animal carcass, with flies buzzing around, was coming from somewhere. For Jin Woo, who had frequently entered dungeons, this was a rather familiar smell, a smell of an animal-type monster. Jin Woo deliberately turned around, presented his back, and very slowly retraced the path he had taken until then. An animal would try to pounce on its prey as soon as its back was shown. An animal-type monster would be no different. And so it happened. When he took his third step, the shop window of a clothing store behind him shattered into pieces, and something jumped out. As soon as it landed on the ground, it leapt toward Jin Woo's exposed neck in one go. Roar! It was a huge wolf with a reddish coat of fur. When he took a closer look, its name also appeared on top of its head, just like the centipedes from the penalty zone, Iron Fang Lion. However, unlike before, its name was in white letters, not red. There is no time to waste here. Two more lions jumped out from their hiding place behind the shop's darkness. It was a pack. Jin Woo's eyes grew wider. The creatures bared their big fangs and closed the distance in an instant. It was at this moment that one of the lions aimed for his face and leapt up. Jin Woo ducked low. The lion flew over his head and landed face first on the ground after failing to stop in time. "Screw this!" Whoosh, accompanied by a bone-chilling sound of wind parting ways. His fist flew straight forward. Pow! It took just one hit, and the head of the lion simply exploded. The corpse of the now headless lion slammed into the ceiling above and then powerlessly fell to the ground. Jin Woo's eyes opened wide as he stared dumbfoundedly at his own fist. What an unexpected destructive power that was! His level rose to ensure that he didn't mishandle the situation, and he hurriedly accessed his status window. His level really did go up, and when a level went up, a single point was added to all of his stats. As it turned out, it wasn't only the quest rewards that could impact the values of his stats. It was also possible to improve his stats through leveling up too. To think he could actually level up. He only carried a vague expectation, but it actually became a reality. His movement speed had increased as well. If it was in the past, there was no way he'd be able to lightly evade the all-out attack of an animal, nor could his punch move fast enough to produce the sound of the air splitting apart, right? The physical strength in his muscles had increased, so obviously his speed would have increased along the way too, simply by raising his strength stat higher. Both his power and speed had gone up. The battle against the lions proved this. The lion that was definitely somewhere nearby had gone with the wind before he had noticed it. Jin Woo hurriedly scanned his surroundings, but he couldn't find a single trace of the creature. Quite likely, it had turned tail and ran away. While he was immersed in the status windows, well, he should have known something was up when it lowered its tail and cautiously studied his mood. Jin Woo smacked his lips, realizing that a bundle of experience points had just escaped from his grasp. Hang on, did these things give away things like magic crystals too? The sudden thought popping up in his head stopped him in his tracks. Monsters appearing within the gates all possessed one, or sometimes several, magic crystals in them. Jin Woo was also a hunter. He was successful in killing these monsters, so not being rewarded for his work kind of felt a bit like he was wrong. Feeling a little bad, he sliced open the lion's stomach, but it turned out to be a waste of time. It seemed that these creatures were fundamentally different from the regular monsters. Jin Woo dusted his hands and was about to stand back up, but then he spotted something glittering within the dead lion's mouth. He opened the creature's maw. One of the lion's fangs was emitting a beam of light. When Jin Woo reached out, a new message popped up before him. Sure thing. Rarity, none. Type, miscellaneous. A large and sharp canine of a lion. Can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Jin Woo got flustered a bit while staring at the canine tooth. There was a store too? Where would you find a system less user-friendly than the one he was saddled with? To think it was designed in such a way that the end user had to personally experience it with his own body before learning about any of its functions. Hell, he wasn't given much of an explanation during the penalty quest, and he almost died as a result. Back then, Jin Woo gnashed his teeth and tried to summon this store thing. He couldn't help but feel his anticipation build up. wondering if a shop with a signboard declaring store and manned by an NPC merchant, kind of like from video games, might really appear before him. With the clinging sounds of coins, his inventory appeared next. Right at the bottom of the display in the column saying gold, he could see the number 20 appearing there. That space had been empty yesterday, 20 gold. He couldn't really use that money in real life, and he couldn't even use the store properly yet, so he had no idea just how much this 20 gold was actually worth. Oh well. A creature from the rank E dungeon wouldn't have given him any decent loot to begin with. Even if there was a difference between the dungeons found beyond the gates and this so-called instant dungeon, it would be the same difference at the end of the day. The lion, he thought, had ran away, actually came back with a bunch of its friends. A wonderfully bright smile bloomed on Jinwoo's face. Even at a casual glance, there must be over 20 of them here. Eureka! Hang on a minute. Was that the right word to use in this sort of situation? Whatever it definitely was a word to express one's joy. Anyway, Jinwoo tightly grasped the sword and spoke up. With the exception of your canines, I'm going to massacre all of you. When the chilling glare of a man who was obsessed about making money landed on the lions, they became intimidated and shuddered slightly. It was at this point that Jinwoo pounced on them without mercy. As he expected, his levels rose up quite quickly simply from searching every nook and cranny of the first floor and killing all the lions he could find. Jinwoo's level shot right up to 7. He had jumped up 5 levels. In other words, when he caught up and killed the very last monster running desperately away from him, a strange message popped up into his view. A title. A title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of his stats would increase by 40%, a bonus boost to his stats when fighting against animal-type monsters. Although the effect was a bit restricted, still, having his stats increase by 40% now, that didn't sound too bad at all. There were plenty of animal-type monsters out there. So would this apply to them as well? If that was the case, then he'd be able to easily kill monsters when participating in the future raids. However, he still earned big time even when disregarding his new title. 34 wolf canines, 2 rusted daggers, a set of traveler clothes, and 1 return crystal. The rusted daggers possessed lower attack power bonus compared to the sword he'd been using until now, and the traveler's clothes were not something he could actually wear, but just some random trinket that he could hawk off to the store. When he sold them all off, he earned just over 1,000 gold. The only thing remaining besides the gold was the return crystal. When he was trying desperately to escape from the dungeon back then, the message said he'd need a return crystal if he wanted to leave, and now, if he wanted to, he could escape at any time. He found himself at a crossroads in front of the stairs leading down to the second floor, and in his hand, a single return crystal grasped tightly. Do I continue on? Or do I back out? If it was in the past, he'd not hesitate and choose the latter. That was how he managed to survive all those raids with his pathetic stats. Everyone said that him surviving until now was a miracle. But, well, he was trying to be smart about his choices, actually. However, the story was different now. He didn't want to retreat here. He felt that if he turned away to leave now, then he'd never be able to take another step forward in his life. I've retreated enough times already, right? Wouldn't it be okay for me to jump in headlong at least once in my life? Jinwoo pocketed the return crystal. His steps climbing down the steps to the second floor were light. Unlike the dungeons of the gates, there was a thing called respawn within the instant dungeon. While he was sweeping away every single monster found on the second floor, all the monsters on the first respawned. While he went back upstairs to deal with them, monsters on the second floor respawned, and so on and so forth. Jinwoo hopped between the first and second floors and killed monsters until his level no longer rose up. Who knows when I'll ever run into another opportunity like this one. Along the way, he got so used to this place that he was able to predict from where and how the monsters would try to attack him. A monkey falling from the ceiling. He lightly evaded the claws of the monkey-type monster falling from the ceiling and stabbed it in the chest with his sword. And then, 1 cat each from the left and right. He cleanly sliced the necks of the Black Panther-like creatures jumping at him from his sides. And with these 3, he had arrived at the end of the second floor. He had cleared out the second floor once more. However, his level hadn't been moving from 15 for a long time now. It seemed that reaching that high was the limit for the first 2 floors. Stats: Strength, 45, Stamina, 24, Agility, 24, Intelligence, 24, Perception, 24. With him being level 15, his stats had risen up by quite a lot. His agility was now almost at 25. He finally got to feel the difference between the agility and the strength stat when the former hit the value of 20. What should I do now? He was looking at the stairs leading down to the 3rd floor. There was a reason why he continued to hunt in the first 2 floors, even though there was a way to go even lower. It's giving me the creeps. With his perception stat so much higher, he could sense the aura of something ominous lurking down there far better than before. Without a doubt, something really strong was hiding somewhere down below. He didn't have to see it to know. Jinwoo recalled the message he saw back by the entrance of this instant dungeon, the existence of the boss. Jinwoo had been roaming the first 2 floors in order to raise his levels until he couldn't anymore, all for the purpose of fighting this boss. He had prepared himself as much as he could, but when the time to actually go down there came, he was getting all sweaty and nervous. Jinwoo lightly slapped both of his cheeks. I mean, I've entered a dungeon, so I can't just leave without taking a look at what this boss looks like now, can I? Jinwoo gripped the sword tightly with both of his hands and slowly descended the steps. Could he have been mistaken when the steps felt unusually longer than before? He swallowed dry saliva down. The lighting was worse than on the first 2 floors, but there was no problem seeing where he was going. Is it because of my perception stat? He couldn't help but feel that his eyesight had improved greatly. He cautiously climbed lower until eventually spotting the railway tunnel used by the subway trains. No. He saw where the railway used to be. The tunnel that should have been used by trains was now filled with a jet-black liquid instead. What is this? Rather than a subway tunnel, it was more like a lake or a river now. Just as Jinwoo took one more step forward to take a closer look, a long object shot out from the surface of the black water. Swish! It's fast! The thing that arrived in front of his nose in the blink of an eye was not a log, but a snake with a thickness rivaling one. Actually taken by surprise, Jinwoo could only swing the sword and strike the head of the snake away from him. Clang! Jinwoo's eyes opened wider. What the hell? He did succeed in deviating the direction of the lunging snake, but his trusty steel longsword ended up breaking apart from the impact. Jinwoo looked back in surprise. The snake must have been surprised by his counterattack as well, because it didn't try to follow up right away, but instead chose to simply glare at him while coiling itself up a distance away. The ruler of the swamp, Poison Fang Blue Kasaka. Jinwoo could clearly see the orange-colored name of the monster. It was a creature incomparably faster and harder than those with their names written in white. Even then, for a sword reinforced with magic energy to break like that, Jinwoo swallowed nervously and cautiously studied the boss monster called Kasaka. Blue scales covering its entire body gleamed in an oily manner, as if it had draped itself with thick armor. Those scales had no gaps to speak of. Sword strikes wouldn't have worked in the first place. It would be the same story for punches too. When Jinwoo's thoughts arrived there, the Kasaka must have finished its own analysis on its prey because it finally lunged at him once more. No matter how one looked at it, it was a frightening turn of speed, that's for sure. Jinwoo narrowed his eyes. It's coming. When he concentrated hard, he could now clearly see the attack of the Kasaka, which was something he couldn't even properly decipher in the beginning. This was all due to the increased agility stat. Just before the Kasaka opened its mouth wide and tried to swallow him, Jinwoo swiftly sidestepped and let the attack brush past him. At the same time, he wrapped his arms around the creature and caught it in a headlock. He then tightened his grip. Jinwoo's strength stat was almost at 50. An unbelievably powerful pressure tightened around the snake's main artery. The snake could not escape from his grip and thrashed around as if it was in pain. Jinwoo gritted his teeth and strengthened his arms even more. Slam! Boom! Jinwoo's body slammed against the walls and on the floor, but he never released his arms. If he hadn't raised his levels as high as he did before coming here, there was literally no end to wondering about what if and what could have been. However, all kinds of thoughts still swirled in Jinwoo's head. If he hadn't raised his level to the limit, if his strength stat wasn't so illogically high, then he'd have gone through incredible hell in order to kill the Kasaka. No, he might even have died here. So his decision not to come down right away proved to be the smart one. His choice was indeed the right one. Crack. Accompanied by a rather awful noise, the skull of Kasaka gave in and cracked apart. As expected of a boss mob, his level rose up by 2 after killing the Kasaka. Jinwoo tightly clenched his fists. The level that had been stagnating at 15 had jumped up to 17 in just a single day. He crazily raised his level from 1 all the way up to 17. However, no one hunted boss mobs for experience points. Indeed, if it was a boss mob, then it'd be all about the loot drops. When he started checking out the dead snake, 2 spots of light began gleaming from somewhere within its limp body. 2 items because it was a boss. Jinwoo reached out towards the spots of light. Take them all. As soon as he said those words, a dagger made out of a bone and a small pouch with liquid appeared on his palms. Rarity. C. Type dagger. Attack 25. A dagger fashioned from the poison fang of the Kasaka. There are traces of the Kasaka's poison on it, so when attacking it will cause paralysis and bleeding. Status effects. can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Status effect, paralysis. The target will be unable to move. Success rate is fixed. Status effect, bleeding. The target's stamina will be reduced by 1% per second. Jinwoo nodded his head. A dagger made not out of bone but from the fang. Huh, it's not a bad item with those options. Yeah, next up was the pouch. Rarity, A-type, medicine. A pouch containing the refined poison of the Kasaka. Can be found very rarely when hunting Kasakas. Drinking this poison will give you strong skin, but the toxicity will permanently damage your muscles, affect the iron scales of Kasaka. 20% reduction in physical damage. Side effect, damaged muscles, strength, 35. Jinwoo's expression alternated between joy and anguish. The poison fang of Kasaka was a good weapon to replace the broken longsword. Not only did it possess over twice the attack power, but he really liked the two status effects of paralysis and bleeding too. However, this poison sac was a bit... Initially, he was really pleased to find an item with the A rarity rating, but when reading the description, he realized this was not something he could feel completely chuffed about. Of course, that effect of reducing all physical damage taken by 20% was a great option, befitting an A-rank item. However, it also carried a fatal penalty of decreasing his strength stat by 35. It would be a really painful loss for him, especially when he invested all of his points in increasing his strength stat. It was then a new message popped up. Suddenly, his sights blurred for a bit, and then they were restored back to normal, along with a slight bit of dizziness insulting his senses. When he took a look around, he found himself inside a normal subway station. The lights overhead shone brightly, and the black liquid filling up the tunnel was all gone too. But where was everyone? Not just people, but even trains were strangely absent. He even checked the time while thinking that the trains had stopped running for the day because it was so late already. But the clock was indicating 10 p.m. He entered the Hapjeong station around the lunch hour, so he had spent over 9 hours inside that dungeon. Who goes there? Who knew that the voice of another person would sound this welcoming? Jinwoo quickly raised his head. He saw a soldier wielding a rifle. Who are you? Why are you coming out from there? Haven't you heard the broadcast? The expression of the soldier was so serious that even Jinwoo's own expression hardened in an instant. Did something happen? What the... How can you even say that? The soldier approached closer, but then he spotted the broken sword in Jinwoo's hand. After it broke, it could no longer be stored in the inventory, and Jinwoo didn't feel like leaving it behind, so he just carried it outside like this. Seeing that, the light within the soldier's eyes changed rapidly. He then carefully studied Jinwoo's current appearance and found that this soldier had taken a closer look. Jinwoo's clothes displayed various hints of the youth participating in many fierce battles recently. The crumpled expression of the soldier lightened up in an instant. Are you a hunter by any chance? Yes, I am one, but please forgive me this way. Please let me guide you there, he said, sensing that his troubles might get more complicated if he said there'd been a misunderstanding here. Sang Jinwoo decided to quietly follow the soldier's guidance for now. Jinwoo then swept his gaze around his vicinity. Now that I see it, The surrounding atmosphere felt rather suspicious. The streets were totally deserted. The only people he could see were the soldiers and the members of the police. Also corpses belonging to monsters, destroyed cars, and buildings with cracks running up their walls. Jinwoo realized what had happened here. A gate must have opened up nearby. Something like that almost never happened nowadays with the well-established hunter system in place. But sometimes a gate would appear in a remote area and it would go unnoticed for a while. As a result, no one would come around to close it in time. When such an event unfolded, soldiers from the nearby bases were dispatched in order to buy some time until hunters could arrive on the scene. Of course, the weapons of soldiers didn't work against the monsters. However, in order to facilitate the evacuation of civilians, someone had to be offered up as sacrifices. In other words, they were to become cannon fodder, a role someone had no choice but to perform that had been saddled on the shoulders of this nation's youths. I've received word that the monsters in the vicinity have been dealt with and only the biggest one remains. Jinwoo nodded his head. He didn't need to hear the soldier's explanation too. No. He could actually sense the presence of a powerful life form nearby, and he could even sense several auras of hunters surrounding it. The enhanced perception stat was transmitting crucial information in the form of sensations and feelings, and that's how Jinwoo got to figure it out almost immediately. That thing is the boss. Soon enough, the creature could be seen in the distance in the empty open space. Not too far from him, a dozen or so hunters were surrounding a giant made out of rock. It was as tall as a telephone pole. It was a golem-type monster. Yak! The soldier spat out a gasp of fear as he took a step backwards. Perhaps it was his first time seeing one. Since the moment he saw it, his entire body had stiffened noticeably. But then again, most people would react in a similar fashion. The difference between seeing a monster for real and seeing it on a TV or a computer monitor was like heaven and earth. After all, unlike him, Jinwoo remained calm and observed the unfolding situation. Healers, concentrate your healing on the tanker. We're also doing our best. Why isn't it dying already? What are the damage dealers doing? It's not even remotely close enough to dying. Is it that the monster's defenses are too strong, and we just don't have enough magic-type hunters in our group because they have been summoned out here in haste? None of them seem to be high-ranked hunters. Both their defenses and attacks didn't look that effective at all. Because of that, hunters couldn't avoid being embroiled in the protracted battle of attrition. Boom! When the golem slammed its massive stone fist downward, the hunter acting as the tanker had no choice but to kneel down just for a brief second. The tanker vomited out a mouthful of blood. The tanker might die at this rate. Jinwoo's gaze, as he took all of these in, gleamed quite sharply. If it's only that much, I can do this. Jinwoo slowly took several steps back. This golem-type boss might possess high defense, but its rank was probably lower than its scary outer appearance might suggest. Just from the aura, he admitted it was definitely weaker than the boss of the instant dungeon. The Poison Fang Blue, whatever. So if he could just render its high defenses to nothing, what was needed right now was a powerful strike that could penetrate past the dumb rock giant's defenses. Jinwoo got to a sufficient distance away and took a position of throwing something. The muscles in the arm holding the broken sword began swelling up quite violently. Out of the blue, thick, pulsing veins even popped up on the back of his hand. All of his physical strength was concentrated in his right arm. A short while after that, the arm pulled back, taut like the string of a bow, and was shot forward at the speed of sound. Go! The view of the rank D hunter, Lahan Su, was turning dark. He couldn't continue anymore. His prize shield had begun developing cracks, as if their magic energy had been depleted. The amount of healing magic hitting him from the healers had decreased quite noticeably. At this rate, every single one of them would die for sure. Lahan Su had to make a decision now. The only feasible plan here was for him to buy enough time so the other hunters could safely escape from here. And at a later time, hunters with higher ranks would show up to kill this golem, or they would all die together here. Lehansu shouted out while looking back. Leave this to me, and you all gotta— It was at this moment that Lehansu saw it. Something flew towards him as it gleamed coldly in the night air. Actually, he could only sense that he had seen something, but his eyes couldn't really pick up on anything tangible. It was that fast. Something slammed into the golem's head, and it grandly exploded. It's working! Our attacks are working! It's falling a little bit more, just a bit more, and we'll win! It seemed that none of them had noticed the object flying in from somewhere because they were too focused on attacking the monster, with the sole exception of Lahan Su standing right in front of the golem. In the end, the golem toppled over. The heavy body fell down to the ground and kicked up a mighty dust storm. Hunters all cried out in elation and celebrated their victory. We did it. We killed it. Only Lahan Su had seen everything unfold, and he slowly shook his head. No, our attacks didn't even work on this guy. Lehan Su hurriedly searched around the vicinity of the fallen golem. Just what did destroy the head of this rock giant? He thought out loud and searched around. Eventually, he discovered the remnants of a broken sword. Although there were some traces of magic energy within it, it was basically a cheap, plain steel sword. What, someone threw something, this worthless, and destroyed a boss-level golem capable of brushing off the combined attacks of 10+ hunters. Suddenly, he forgot what he wanted to say. Lahan Su silently alternated his gaze between the corpse of the golem and the broken sword, before he ran past the cheering hunters and in the direction the sword had flown in from. Excuse me? He found a dazed soldier standing there. Pardon you talking to me? That's right, you! When a hunter with a hulking physique hurriedly rushed towards him, the soldier couldn't help but swallow nervously with a stiff face. That was how great the pressure a hunter gave off to regular people. Lahan Su displayed the broken sword and asked, Did you throw this? Oh, that— The soldier looked behind him, only for his eyes to go around in surprise. But there was a hunter standing right behind me, though of course there was no one there now. While the flustered soldier was looking around the vicinity, Lahan Su scratched the back of his neck and stared at the broken sword. That power, that destructive power, could it have been a high-rank hunter? I'd never know, since the protagonist had disappeared already. Around the same time, Jin Woo was on his way home. He turned around to leave as soon as the golem began teetering about. Indeed, he was the one who brought down the golem. He was well aware of this fact. Now, originally the loot and the profit arising from a dead monster belonged solely to the hunter who managed to kill it. If he wanted to, he could contest for the rights to the golem. However, it had become problematic when trying to prove, that I am capable of bringing down a golem like that. Who would believe the notion of a giant golem crashing down because of an attack from a measly little rank E? His level rose up by 1 because he had killed the golem. Indeed, my levels will rise if I hunt the monsters from the normal dungeons. He had learned some valuable information that alone was worth it. A person stepping outside the house in the early hours of dawn would inevitably be cautious in their movements. Well, they might end up accidentally waking up their family members. After all, that was why Sang-jin was silently closing the front door to her home so that her brother wouldn't wake up from his sleep as she was about to leave for school. But then you gonna school now? She was taken by surprise when a voice came from near her, and she quickly turned around to look. Jinwoo's eyes opened up real wide in shock. What the heck? You were up already? Yep, been a while since I was up, you know. Hey, have fun today and be careful on the road. Sure. Now that I think about it, her older brother's back seemed broader than before for some reason. No way, that's true. A human's body wasn't made out of some rubber band, so how could it make any sense for him to expand and contract in a space of a few days? I've probably made a mistake. Just as Jinna shook her head, Jinwoo suddenly pushed forward an umbrella to her. Why, an umbrella? Jin received it and took a look at the sky. As it was still early dawn, the sky remained dark, but it seemed to be more or less clear and cloudless. But it doesn't look like it's going to rain. Though, take it anyway, but it's heavy, you know. Take it with you regardless. Besides, it's a folding-type umbrella, so it doesn't even weigh anything. Jinna lightly kicked the door a couple of times to express her disgruntlement, folded the umbrella, shoved it inside the empty space in her school bag, and turned around to leave. Hang on! Her steps came to an abrupt halt after she remembered the difference in the eye levels between her and her brother. Something was rather odd. He had been saving up the stat points earned from the quests of the past 4 days. He made sure to complete the daily quest every day. Of course, he also didn't forget to always check his rewards too. However, he hadn't distributed the points until now. The issue was, this was tough indeed. He found it rather difficult to come to a decision. The strength stat, it was a wonderful stat, that's for sure. He hadn't regretted at all investing all of his points into this one back when he started this thing. Agility, this was also a pretty darn good stat too. Against weak enemies, it only helped a little, but as the levels of his opponents rose up in the future, no doubt he'd be relying on this stat more and more. Well, speed was a relative thing after all. Then stamina and perception. It would be great if his stamina was high, obviously, and perception turned out to be very useful as well. Finally, intelligence. This was the problem child. He hadn't been able to figure out the stat's uses yet. His level had increased by quite a lot, but he didn't feel any smarter than before. His memories didn't seem to have improved, nor did his ability to calculate quickly either. He thought it had to be related to magic. After a lengthy deliberation, he decided on the order of priority: strength 50, stamina 27, agility 35, intelligence 27, perception 29. It was then that he could hear from the living room, "Is the association calling me?" In the past, he didn't want to participate in the raids, so he did his best to ignore the calls until the last possible moment. But right now, he was raring to go and test out his raised abilities against various monsters. Jinwoo quickly snatched up the receiver. "This is the hunter, Song Jinwoo. You finally picked up the phone. Too bad it wasn't a call from the association." A sigh leaked out of his mouth. "Learner Jinwoo, why is it so difficult to get in touch with you lately?" The voice coming from the speaker was a familiar one. It had been 4 years already since he graduated from high school and therefore stopped being a learner, but the owner of the building always attached the prefix in front of Jinwoo's name ever since taking in both the siblings when they were still young kids. "I'm really sorry about that. I was admitted to the hospital because of an incident a few days ago, so that's what happened. I should have known." "Well, there's that. In Learner Jinwoo, the rent for this month hadn't come in yet, so what should I do? If it's a bit too tough for you, should I delay it for a month or two?" "Oh no, it's fine. I'll send the money in a bit later." "Okay, but don't force yourself. You here, trying to look after your mom and your younger sister, you're going through so much hardship there. I know no money is important, but don't forget to take care of your body too." "Thank you, I won't forget that." The call ended there. Jinwoo pulled out the bank balance book from one of the drawers. The remaining amount in the account was only around $800,000, just over 700. "I gotta make some money first." Jinwoo decided to take care of the urgent matters first. He was no longer the same guy from a few days ago who couldn't even kill a single ranked monster and shiver in fear. Should I just take the rank reassignment test and increase my rank right away? Eventually, Jinwoo shook his head. He knew that was a stupid thing to do, no matter how hard he thought about it. A hunter ranked E, he suddenly became a high-ranked one. Whether that was B or maybe even C, it didn't matter. The reawakening would always become a hot topic of conversation. The masses loved nothing more than a good gossip, and hunters just so happened to be a good subject to chew on. The old saying went that if there were 5 mouths, then there would be 10 eyes, meaning the more people talked about you, the more eyes would be focused on you. His stats would continue to rise up in the future, so it'd be only a matter of time before his special constitution was discovered by the others. He was far too weak as he was now until he possessed enough power to protect himself. He didn't want the world to know of his existence, meaning taking the test to reassign his rank was out of the question. But I still need to make money here. Hello? Jinwoo stated his reasons for calling as precisely as possible and calmly waited for the answer. Oh, you're an E rank? The response from the other side was better than expected. It's fine. We just need someone to show up and fill up the head count, that is all. However, it's a gate-ranked SE, so it'd be hard for you to hunt there. So, we'll just split the profits among ourselves and we'll just give you 2 million in cash. How about it? Can you come right away? 2 million for a day's work. Around 1,765. It was a lot of money for simply being there to make up the numbers. A rather tempting offer. It was regrettable that he couldn't get to share the dungeon loot, but he might end up losing out on making 2 million just by trying to be too greedy for now. Let's put out the urgent fires first. Such an opportunity wouldn't come around every day. After all, 2 million was enough for him and his sister's monthly living expenses. Jinwoo said yes to the offer. I'll be there in less than 15 minutes. The man who looked like the leader of the group waved his hand at Jinwoo. Hey, over here. It was a bearded man with a fairly big physique. He smiled softly and walked closer while speaking to Jinwoo. Are you Mr. Sang Jinwoo? That's correct. It's a relief that you found the right place so quickly. I guess this is fate. So how about we greet each other before we get started? The bearded man briefly introduced the members of his team. The 8 of them, including himself, were regular teammates that worked together all the time, while the remaining guy was someone who also came here to make up the numbers just like Jinwoo. Jinwoo greeted the other team members and studied their countenance carefully. Thanks to his enhanced perception stat, he was able to more or less sense everyone's capabilities. 5 with a similar rank, 4 with a slightly lower rank than them, 5 rank Cs, and around 4 with D or lower. There was a regulation when attempting to clear a gate-rated SE. The minimum number of a party had to be 10 hunters, and more than half had to be at least ranked C or higher. Excuse me, looks like we're both pieces of fluff in this party, huh? He was none other than the other hunter, Yu Jin-hoo, who had been brought along in order to fill up the numbers. He was a young man with a bright expression. However, unlike Jin-woo, he was actually going to participate in battles. Jin-woo lightly nodded his head as Yu Jin-hoo greeted him before shifting his gaze away. Before we enter, you two, take a look at these. Hwang Dong-soo pushed forward a page of a document to Jin-woo and Yu Jin-hoo. It turned out to be a simple contract. Write your names on the bottom and sign it, and they were good to go. The content said Jin-woo would not participate in any hunting. He would not participate in the sharing of the loot. And when the raid was over, he would be paid 2 million won right away. The terms were the same as what he heard over the phone. However, they were not the ones to catch his attention. I have to promise not to question them regardless of whatever incident happens inside the dungeon. Unlike the raids organized by the association, one would not be able to claim for compensation if something happened during a raid organized by the freelancers. One of the reasons why hunters couldn't get a life insurance either. One had to look after one's own neck. In other words, only now did it feel real that Jin-woo had entered an assault team. What am I supposed to do when we're inside? Nothing too particular. Just follow us and help us carry the luggage, that's all. Your luggage? Hwang Dong-soo pointed at the huge backpack. One of his dongsangs pulled out from the minivan. You'll be carrying around lunchboxes to eat when inside, several sets of clothing and equipment, first aid kits, and some other stuff. Wait, first aid kits? When entering a dungeon? Jin-woo couldn't help but question this. You are not entering with a healer. I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine. Hwang Dong-soo smiled awkwardly. To think this team just barely met the required minimum number of hunters. One of the additional members mistook a raid as a blind date or something, and the composition of the assault team only happened to feature a tanker and damage dealers, and not one healer. Even after hearing that there was no healer present, that oblivious additional member didn't seem too bothered by the revelation. It was the sure proof that he was a newbie. Jin-woo smirked inwardly. They are a bunch of wannabes. However, he still signed on the contract, Not because he needed that 2 million, but because he knew very well that he could protect himself now. Huang Dongxiok confirmed the signatures of both men and shouted out in a loud voice, as if he was feeling really pleased today. Okay, let's get going, everyone. The party headed straight to the location of the gate. It was in the middle of the halted construction site for an apartment complex. The economy nowadays isn't so good, but still, Huang Dongxiok clicked his tongue like large tombstones. Unfinished apartment buildings stood still, sporadically imparting a certain sense of foreboding to all who looked at them. Could a cemetery of giants feel this way to observers? Yu Jinho had walked closer to Jinwoo and whispered softly, "While the employees and the investors are going through hell at the moment, the CEO of the project ran off to overseas 2 months ago, along with 900 billion. Jinwoo gave the other guy plenty of hints, but it seemed like Yu Jinho didn't want to leave his side at all. "Hayoung, are you always this quiet?" Before anyone had noticed it, the honorific had become Hayoung. Jinwoo couldn't ignore this kid anymore. "Don't you know how to take the hint?" "Well, I've never lived while worrying about taking hints." So, was this guy simply good-natured or just brainless? Jinwoo wordlessly scratched the side of his head as he stared at Yu Jinho and that bright smile of his. "Oh," the hunters all let out a surprised gasp. "Huang Dongxiok, is this really a gate-rated C? But isn't it too big? You think the association was lying to us? They said that investigators came around here twice already. A hole in the air, floating like a black hole. People took to calling it a gate. Its rank was assigned according to the waves of magical energy emission coming from inside. Folks from the association would stop by first to assign a rank to each one. After that, individuals or guilds wanting to clear the gate could follow the procedure and apply for a permit. Gates ranked B or higher were most of the time left to the big guilds. Well, they were too difficult for freelancers to clear after all. So assault parties formed by freelancers took care of the gates ranked lower than that, which meant that a gate rank C was effectively the hardest one for hunters not affiliated with anyone to clear. Huang Dongxiok stood in front of the gate and looked back at his team. "I'll be entering first. Do your best to keep up, everyone." The tanker entered first, and the other hunters began entering one by one. Yu Jinho began pulling out his own equipment from his back. The sword and the shield, coming out from his bag, gleamed attractively under the light. Even a casual glance could tell that they were very expensive. They were definitely not something a newbie hunter could organize on his own. The interior of the dungeon was eerily quiet. Not only that, but it was also completely dark too. Huang Dongxiok issued his first order. "Hey, Gyu Huan, I need a light." "All right." The magic-related hunter Gyu Huan created a ball of a light in midair. The surroundings became bright immediately. Huang Dongxiok lowered his shield and tilted his head slightly. "What the hell? Where are all the monsters, I wonder?" There is no light in here either. Now normally there should have been luminous stones found here and there inside cave-like dungeons and emitted some light to illuminate the way forward. However, this dungeon didn't have those. Yu Jinho whispered to Jinwoo from the side, "Huang Dongxiok, could there be a dungeon without monsters in it?" "Shush!" Jinwoo gestured the younger man to keep quiet because Jinwoo's ears were twitching. He could hear lots of footsteps coming from the distance. Jinwoo spoke up. "It's not that there aren't any, they just haven't arrived yet." Yu Jinho swallowed nervously after hearing that. Rumble. Soon the party could hear what Jinwoo had heard earlier on. Only then did Huang Dongxiok realize something was off. Here, a dungeon with no luminous stones could mean what? Moves around in groups, lives in darkness, and rushes towards a source of light. Oh crap! The complexions of Huang Dongxiok and his teammates became ashen all at the same time. "It's bugs! Bugs are coming! Damn it, of all the monster types, why did it have to be insects?" Huang Dongxiok cried out. "Get into your positions, they are coming out!" Insects were the most troublesome to deal with. Their shells were quite sturdy. They always moved around in large groups, and each individual possessed pretty high combat potential as well. The sounds of the insect legs rustling on the ground noisily reverberated throughout the cave. It meant that they had come pretty close. Now, Huang Dongxiok raised his shield right up below his chin. However, they couldn't see any insects. Even then, his teammates began raising a fuss from behind him. "What's going on here? Why can't I see them, but they are close by though? Dongxiok, can you see anything out in front?" It was at this time that Jinwoo shouted out, "Above you!" Huang Dongxiok reflexively looked up. Huge insects were running towards them on the ceiling. If they were discovered late, even for a single second, those things would have jumped down on top of their heads. When fighting against monsters such as these insect types that formed large groups, the breaking down of the team's formation would mean death for everyone involved. If those were discovered too late, then Huang Dongxiok felt a chill run down his spine. The silver lighting here was such that he couldn't spot a single ant-like creature among the various insects. He raised his voice and shouted out, Fire, fire, and bring them down once they are on the ground. I'll attract the aggro from here onwards. The capability of the tanker would prove to be crucial. Hwang Dong-seok activated his provocation skill to attract the gazes of all the monsters to himself. And as if they had a prior agreement, monsters all turned their heads to glare at Hwang Dong-seok at the same time. Dozens upon dozens of monsters rushed towards Hwang Dong-seok's position. His shield managed to defend against the attacks of the bugs without fail. The strong jaws and claws couldn't tear the shield in half. The tanker, Hwang Dong-seok, defended commendably well from the front, all stable and unmoving in attack, along with that short but manly shout. All the accumulated firepower of the team poured out on the marauding insect horde. The pain screams of the monsters rose up from here, there, and everywhere. Jin-woo stood at the back and observed this situation as it unfolded. That was the contractual obligation he had to adhere to for this raid. He inwardly simulated how he'd fight alone, as his eyes continued to take in the battle happening in front. How frustrating. Jin-woo had to suppress his urges to rush out there several times already. He could see so many open gaps within the ranks of the monsters, and he also spotted the hunters missing those gaps and continued to commit simple errors. So, how could he not feel frustrated when he was not allowed to do anything and simply had to stand around? Even then, the damage to Gyu Hwan's team proved to be surprisingly non-existent. It was all because their teamwork was rather excellent. It seemed that the relaxed demeanor of Hwang Dong-seok before the raid began was not just for a show. After all, perhaps because they've been working together for so long, they were able to communicate quite smoothly. Being able to communicate quickly like this would inevitably result in excellent teamwork as well. It was a world apart from the ragtag bunch of hunters brought together by the association. What's more surprising is that this kid turns out to be pretty handy too. Jin-woo's gaze shifted over to Yu Jin-ho next, when a monster bit into his shield. He kicked it away and swung his sword quickly at it. The expensive sword easily separated the monster's head from its body. For a newbie ranked D hunter, he was defending himself admirably well.